Ever since the first chapter of Deltarune was released back in 2018, insert some extremely stale joke about how long ago that was and about the COVID pandemic, people have been guessing to Ralsei's true origins. One of the popular theories early on was that he is the missing green crayon found in the drawer of Toriel's house. Some say he's an imaginary friend given form by the Dark World. Nowadays, a lot of people say he's Chris's old monster headband, which I myself believed until now. I have seen the light. Ralsei is actually one of Toriel's abortions. Yes, I said one of. That's not the part of the original theory, but we'll get to that in a bit. Let's go back to the bare bones of this theory for a minute. What evidence is there for Ralsei being Toriel's aborted son? Ralsei is very clearly meant to visually remind you of Toriel, Asgore, and especially of Azrael. This was noticed long before Chapter 5, where Asgore remarks himself on the familiarity of Ralsei to Azrael. Now remember that the only goats other than Ralsei in both Undertale and Deltarune are Toriel and family. Is it really just a coincidence that Ralsei happens to look so similar to Azrael? We know that Ralsei is a Darkner, but what if he, too, is actually related to Toriel? At some point, Toriel would have gotten an abortion because she cannot support so many children on the wage of a school teacher, and Ralsei is created from the preserved fetus when exposed to the Dark World. Ralsei is called the Lonely Prince, after all. Prince to who? Toriel and Asgore. However, this leads us to another question. How did Ralsei get to the supply closet? This ties into my expansion upon the original Ralsei aborted fetus theory. Allow me to introduce you to the Toriel fetus room theory. You see, long before Undertale was given form, a whisper was echoed through the vast chamber of the internet. Long ago, someone was asked what they would do if they were a woman. Their answer has since become a classic copy-pasta, with the original lost to time. I quote, "I would get myself pregnant, get an abortion, keep the remains in a jar, repeat this process several times at varying stages in the pregnancy until I have a whole room full of fetus jars. Once the collection is complete, I'd carry the next pregnancy to term, and whenever the child screws up, I'm going to make them sit in the fetus room." I believe that this is actually the words of Toriel. Undertale did have social media after all, at least an early form of it. Since the origins of this post are vague at best, what if it was planted over a decade ago by Toby Fox as the clue we need to solve Deltarune? You may be wondering, what about the fact that the question answers if they were a woman? Well, this actually is just more evidence. You see, in Undertale, Toriel is not truly, quote-unquote, a woman in the biological sense. Monsters do not give birth, and they have little physical form. Yet in Deltarune, monsters bleed, as we can see from Susie, and this implies that Toriel is, finally, a true female, and I believe her hope transcended the planes of the other universe, and manifested in her Deltarune incarnation, her hope to create the fetus room. This all loops around to explain why Ralsei is in the school closet. He's there simply because that is where Toriel chose to create the fetus room. Not only does this theory make sense to explain why Ralsei is where he is and why he looks like he does, but it also explains a lot about Deltarune's plot as a whole. When you meet Ralsei in Chapter 1, it's implied that he's been waiting a long time for your arrival, and if that is the case, then how did nobody else discover the Dark World beforehand? Well, now we know the answer is simple: fear. They knew of the fetus room and the horrors within. Even Alphys, the teacher, was unwilling to venture to the supply closet, hence why she sent Susie and Chris instead. You may wonder how Ralsei moves between dark worlds. Well, Chris is actually smuggling him under their shirt. We get visual confirmation of this in-game when Chris's shirt becomes slightly larger during certain segments of the game. It's honestly an appalling failure of the Deltarune community that nobody has noticed this before, but I am here to show it now. All of this creates another question here, however. Ralsei is obviously the Prince of Toriel and Asgore, but he is the lonely prince, alone in his kingdom. What happened to the others? What about the rest of the fetuses? Well, that's where Asgore comes into play. Many people think that Asgore's vague posting refers to some incident with him as the police chief, something involved with the dark world. Put simply, they're wrong. And that is merely a red herring to distract you from the reality that the incident is actually his attempt to destroy the fetus room. Toriel has never forgiven him for this, hence why she and Asgore are apart. Asgore does say that nobody blamed him for the incident, including Toriel, but realistically that's denial on his part and unwillingness to blame his wife. Asgore took all of the other fetuses out of the supply closet, leaving Ralsei to do last, since he is the largest, most mature fetus, and thus the hardest to transport and burn. Before he could take Ralsei, however, Toriel undoubtedly rushed to stop Asgore, which is why Ralsei remains when all the others are gone. I said burn, and there is really nothing Asgore could do with the fetuses other than cremate them in the church. And here we find another important explanation of the chapter lore. You see, the Titan's spawn are actually formed from the ashen remains of Toriel's unborn children, which is partly why Ralsei is so horrified to see them in Chapter 4. The Titan has nothing to do with the Titan spawn, quote-unquote, and is a misnomer created by Ralsei in denial to cope for the destruction of his brethren. All of that said, what did Toriel do after the destruction of the fetus room? Well, I have evidence that Toriel has never stopped pursuing her trans-universal dream. In chapters 1, 2, and 3, Toriel's sprite is actually slightly larger in the belly than in chapter 4 and chapter 5, and I cannot believe that others have not noticed. See, this is actually visual proof that Toriel is still performing abortions to this day, except now she has help, the Knight. At the end of chapter 3, when the Knight casts that purple beam on Toriel, it's actually taking her unborn child to be added to the fetus room. Where is the post-Asgore fetus room? Well, it's obviously in the bunker, as that's where the Knight has returned to. A complaint that may arise from this is, but what about Gaster? The bunker has to be connected to him somehow. Well, what if the real Gaster was the fetuses Toriel aborted along the way?